Michael Denison is Research Director at Control Risks, an international business consultancy. Thank you very much for joining us today, Michael. What I wanted to really get onto is, of course, the market reaction was negative. We saw stocks fall across the board in Asia, mostly in South Korea, of course. Does the death of Kim Jong Il mean the region is less stable, do you think?
Yes, to a certain extent it does. The real reason is that there is so much uncertainty surrounding the succession. Kim Jong Il is an unknown quantity. We're in uncharted territories here. There's never been a succession beyond two leaders that is a non-monarchical succession. So, as a consequence, we really don't know what the future holds, but it will be very difficult for North Korea to carry on with business as usual.
Michael, can you paint for us, if you will, the worst case and the best case scenarios you can envisage coming out of this?
The best case scenario is a managed succession. That means to say that Kim Jong-un takes power in the short term and the internal situation is stabilised, followed by a gradual reformist agenda towards greater openness, a shift to a market economy, and perhaps a renunciation or at least a scaling down of the sort of military posture of the North Koreans. The worst case scenario is either a contested or a failed succession, in which case different factions within the Korean elite will contest power between themselves and the regime's power structures will break down.
China is crucial here because, of course, China is the biggest ally to North Korea as it was. What do you think it means for China as a country at the moment?
China will be watching these events very carefully and very closely. You're right to say that China is the strongest supporter of North Korea in the international environment, and Chinese support is essential for North Korea to be a viable state. So they will be wondering and thinking about what are the potential scenarios themselves. I think a real failing in the international community has been the lack of a mechanism between the major regional powers, South Korea, Japan, China, Russia to some extent, and the US, to plan collectively for this sudden shift in the leadership.
So there has been this sudden shift, and there's going to be huge ramifications, of course, for South Korea. What do you think those implications are? How will they be viewing this at the moment?
Well, economically, the ramifications won't be that significant, simply because North Korea is such a closed economy. However, there will be security ramifications if the regime begins to break down internally and if there's a mass exodus. Now, that mass exodus of people, if it were to occur, would probably be to the north, to China, given that the border there is more open. The major security threat, therefore, for the South Koreans will be if the North Koreans engage in some act of military aggression. Either,
of course, we've seen that before.
We have. Either in the form of jostling for power between different factions of the North Korean elite, or as a binding mechanism to bring the country together during a very uncertain period.
What do you think South Korea and indeed the international viewers will be really focusing on at the moment? Is it 1.7 million troops that are currently stationed in North Korea, or is it the nuclear weapons? Is that more what is on the US's mind, and indeed Europe's mind?
There's a whole combination of issues. North Korea has one of the largest standing armies in the world. Were the regime to collapse, that would be a huge challenge for demobilization of so many people in uniform. They have a missile testing program which enables them to fire ballistic missiles to South Korea and Japan. They have a nuclear weapons program. They have one of the world's largest stocks of chemical weapons. And the regime has involved itself in both cyber espionage and forms of criminality such as counterfeiting and drugs trafficking, all of which can destabilize the region.
I want to finish on a positive note, because you do talk about the positive impact could be. We see an opening of the economy in North Korea. What do you think the key movements would be? What areas, what industries could they focus on?
Well, I think China will be the critical player here, because China has managed this process itself into a sort of quasi-capitalist society, albeit retaining the party as the central organising power. And I think the markets will be looking to that sort of movement in the medium term, that there will be a phased, gradual, stable transition into greater openness. North Korea is probably the world's last untapped consumer market, completely untapped. So there is potential there, but that will be well down the road.